Tell me, Rich, what does it feel like to be a loser? My son-in-law, Jason, asked me that, a smirk on his face. He sat beside my daughter, Amanda, who said nothing. He thought he was delivering an insult. In reality, he was giving his 12-year notice, effective immediately. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The drive home from Amanda's house was a silent one. The echo of Jason's question, "What does it feel like to be a loser?" didn't ring in my ears with anger. It landed with the quiet, heavy thud of a final, undeniable truth. My quiet, orderly house greeted me, a stark contrast to the simmering tension I had just left behind. I walked into my home, office, the one room that was still entirely mine, and sat in the dark for a long time. My gaze fell upon a silver-framed photograph on my desk. It was Eleanor, my late wife, her smile as bright as I remembered it from 30 years ago. The foundation of the last 12 years wasn't built on money. It was built on a promise. I remembered the cold, sterile scent of the hospital room, the weak but determined grip of her hand in mine. "Promise me you'll look after our little girl, Rich," she had whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Promise me she'll never want for anything." And I had promised. How could I not? Amanda was our world. I had promised, and for 12 years, I had kept that promise with the same methodical precision I had applied to my entire career as a chief engineer for the city. It started small. 12 years ago, Jason had just been laid off from a sales job. They were young, with a baby on the way, and the panic in my daughter Amanda's voice over the phone was something I couldn't bear. "Dad, we're going to lose the apartment. I don't know what to do." So I did what any father would do. I stepped in. "Don't you worry about a thing, sweetheart," I told her. "I'll cover the rent for a few months until Jason gets back on his feet." The relief in her voice was my reward. Jason, to his credit at the time, seemed genuinely humbled. He came over, shook my hand firmly, and said, "Rich, I swear, as soon as I land a new job, we'll pay you back every single cent." I had waved it off. "Just take care of my daughter and my grandkid. That's all the payment I need." He found a new job within a few months, in a new, more promising field. Tech sales. It was commission-based, he explained, with huge potential, but slow to start. The few months of help I offered turned into 6, then 12. When their second child, Ethan, was born, they needed a bigger place, a house. "Just a starter home, Dad," Amanda had said. "Something safe in a decent school district." They found a charming 3-bedroom bungalow. The down payment was more than they could manage. "We'll be stretched so thin with the mortgage," Jason explained to me over a coffee, his tone earnest. "It's about image, Rich. To get the big clients, I need to project stability." I understood the logic, or at least I told myself I did. I paid the down payment. Then, seeing their strained budget, I offered to just handle the mortgage. I set up an automatic payment directly from my investment account. It was cleaner, that way, more efficient. That was the first domino. A year later, their family car, a sensible sedan, started having problems. "I can't be driving clients around in this thing, Rich," Jason had lamented. "It looks unprofessional." Soon, they had a new, gleaming SUV in the driveway, a lease. I took care of the monthly payments, another automatic draft. Then came the credit cards. It started with emergencies, a broken water heater, a medical bill. But soon, the statements started reflecting a different kind of life. Designer clothes for Amanda, expensive golf clubs for Jason, lavish birthday parties for the kids. The balances crept up, and so I increased my payments to cover them, telling myself that Eleanor wouldn't want her daughter to be stressed about debt. My life as their silent benefactor became a well-oiled machine. I was an engineer, after all. I created a separate ledger, a binder I kept locked in my filing cabinet. Every payment, every wire transfer, every bill was meticulously documented. In the beginning, I did it to keep track, thinking one day they would, as Jason had promised, pay me back. But after a few years, I knew that day would never come. The ledger became something else. It became a chronicle of my promise to Eleanor. The change in them was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. The tearful thank yous from Amanda after a large payment stopped. They were replaced by a casual, "Oh, Dad, did you get that bill for the country club membership?" The Sunday dinners, which I hosted, started to feel less like a family gathering and more like a mandatory board meeting where I was the silent funder. Jason would spend half the time on his phone, closing deals, his voice loud and boastful. Amanda, who used to love helping me in the kitchen, would now arrive late and sigh about how tired she was from her spin class. The small cuts were the deepest. For my birthday last year, they gave me a generic gift card to a steakhouse. "We were just so busy, Dad," Amanda had said, a hollow apology in her voice. Later that week, I saw a charge on the credit card statement I paid for, a weekend getaway for them at a 5-star resort, costing 10 times the amount of my gift card. They never mentioned it. They didn't have to. The message was clear. My role was to provide the fuel for their lives, not to participate in it. I was the infrastructure, silent and unseen. And infrastructure is only ever noticed when it fails. Sitting there in the silence of my office, the loser comment didn't feel like an insult anymore. It felt like a diagnosis. Jason wasn't just being cruel, he was being honest. In his world, a world of shiny surfaces and projected success, I was a loser. I was a quiet old man in a modest house who didn't understand the game. He had no idea that I wasn't just funding his game. I owned the stadium, the lights, and the scoreboard, and he had just insulted the owner. The promise I made to Eleanor was to look after Amanda. It wasn't a mandate to bankroll a lifestyle of disrespect. It wasn't a vow to be a silent, walking ATM. Looking after her, I realized with a chilling clarity, might now mean doing the one thing I hadn't done in 12 years. It might mean turning off the machine. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called Carol. Carol had been Eleanor's best friend, and after Eleanor passed, she had become mine. A retired accountant with a mind as sharp as a tack and a no-nonsense attitude, she was the only other person on earth who knew the full extent of my arrangement with Amanda and Jason. She had been against it from day one. "Let me guess," she said, her voice crackling over the phone, dispensing with hellos. "The Crown Prince and Princess have decreed another royal expenditure?" "Worse," I said. "He called me a loser." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her pragmatic brain. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and dangerous. "Richard, you tell me the word, and I will personally drive over there and show them what a real audit looks like. We can start with the business expenses. I'm sure Jason has been charging to the cards you pay for." I managed a small laugh. "Not yet, Carol. A good engineer never demolishes a structure without first understanding its foundations completely. I needed to hear a sane voice." "You're not a loser, Richard. You're a good man who has been taken for a fool," she stated, not as an opinion, but as a fact. "The problem is, when you play the fool for too long, they forget you're just acting. You built half the bridges and tunnels in this city. You managed budgets that would make Jason's head spin. Don't you ever forget who you are." Her words were a much-needed ballast. After the call, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I opened the locked filing cabinet and pulled out the binder. Project Nightingale, I had named it, in honor of Eleanor. It felt fitting. For 12 years, I had been a silent nurse, tending to their financial health. I spent the rest of the day reviewing it, not with sadness, but with the dispassionate eye of an engineer analyzing a failing system. The numbers were staggering. The mortgage, the car leases, the insurance, the club, memberships, the vacations, the weekly grocery bills from high-end organic markets. It wasn't just support anymore. It was a complete subsidization of a life they were presenting to the world as their own. The most galling section was the credit card statements. They told a story of breathtaking entitlement. A $500 haircut for Amanda before a charity gala. A $2,000 set of custom-fit golf clubs for Jason. Charges from Michelin-starred restaurants on Tuesday nights. And then there were the cash advances. Small at first, then larger and more frequent. What were those for? I could only guess. I cross-referenced the dates. A major cash advance in March coincided with a trip to Vegas Jason had claimed was a mandatory work conference. The company hadn't paid for it. I had. A string of purchases from a luxury jeweler in November lined up perfectly with the anniversary gift Jason had given Amanda, a diamond bracelet she had shown me with pride, remarking how incredibly well Jason's career was going. He wasn't just letting me pay for things. He was actively using my money to construct a false narrative of his own success, a narrative he then used to belittle me. It was a dizzying, circular kind of deception. My grandchildren, Chloe and Ethan, were another matter. They were the innocent bystanders in this slow-motion car crash. I loved them dearly. When they were younger, they would run to greet me at the door, their hugs genuine and warm. But as they got older, they started to absorb the attitudes of their parents. Last Christmas, when I gave Ethan a beautifully crafted model train set, something I had loved as a boy, he had looked at it with confusion. "But Grandpa," he had asked, "why? Didn't you just get me the new VR headset? Dad said he could probably get it for me anyway." The request was innocent, but the implication was not. Grandpa's gifts are old-fashioned. Dad's are better. The true turning point, the moment I knew things were irrevocably broken, had happened, about 6 months before the loser comment. It was Amanda's birthday. I wanted to do something special, something from the heart. I spent weeks restoring a beautiful antique vanity table that had belonged to Eleanor. I refinished the wood, polished the brass fittings, and had the mirror re-silvered. It was a piece of their family history, a piece of their grandmother. When I presented it to her, she forced a smile. "Oh, Dad, it's vintage." "It was your mother's," I said quietly. "I know, but it doesn't really fit the aesthetic of our bedroom," she said, glancing at Jason for support. He jumped in immediately. "Yeah, Rich, we're going for more of a minimalist modern vibe. But hey, great thought." The vanity table ended up in their garage, gathering dust, covered by a tarp. 2 weeks later, a charge for $3,000 appeared on their credit card statement from a high-end furniture boutique, Isabel Modern. I looked up the item, a sleek, white, soulless vanity table. They hadn't just rejected my gift. They had rejected my effort, my time, and the memory of their own mother, all while using my money to do it. It was a quiet act of cruelty, far more hurtful than any overt insult. It was a statement that my world, my values, and my history had no place in the shiny modern life I was funding for them. The memory of that vanity table, sitting alone in the dark of their garage, was what flashed in my mind when Jason called me a loser. He wasn't just talking about my quiet life or my old-fashioned ways. He was passing judgment on everything I represented. He had taken my money, my support, and my love, and deemed it all, and by extension me, worthless, unworthy, a failure. And in his self-constructed kingdom, he was the king, and I was the court jester. He had forgotten one crucial rule of history. Even jesters can sometimes whisper the truth in the king's ear. Or, in my case, simply stop paying for the castle. The Sunday dinner where it all came to a head was, ironically, meant to be a celebration. At least that's what Amanda had called it when she invited me. "Jason has some big news, Dad. You should come over." I arrived at the house, their house, as they always called it, at 6 o'clock sharp, carrying a bottle of good Cabernet and a cheesecake from the bakery Eleanor and I used to love. Small traditions I clung to, like a man adrift holding onto a piece of wreckage. The house was immaculate, decorated in shades of gray and white with cold metallic accents. It looked like a page from a magazine, a space designed to be photographed rather than lived in. It had none of the warmth of the home I'd raised Amanda in. Jason greeted me at the door, not with a hug, but with a firm, performative handshake. "Rich, good to see you. Come on in. Drinks are on the bar." He was already dressed in expensive-looking trousers and a cashmere sweater, playing the part of the lord of the manor. Amanda gave me a brief, dutiful hug that smelled of expensive perfume before she rushed back to the kitchen, fussing over a caterer-prepared meal. The kids, Chloe and Ethan, were glued to their iPads in the living room and offered a distracted, "Hi, Grandpa," without looking up. The dinner conversation was a monologue starring Jason. He had just been promoted to senior vice president at his tech firm. He spoke at length about his new responsibilities, his new office, his new six-figure salary, and the synergy of his team. He used words like disruption and leveraging assets, glancing at me as if I couldn't possibly comprehend. "These modern concepts. It's a different world out there now, Rich," he said, cutting into his perfectly cooked steak. "You can't just clock in and clock out for 30 years and expect a gold watch and a pension anymore. You have to be a shark. You have to be aggressive." I just nodded and sipped my wine. I had spent 35 years as a chief engineer for the city, managing billion-dollar infrastructure projects, ensuring the bridges they drove over didn't collapse, and the water they drank was clean. But in his eyes, I was just a relic from a bygone era of salaried safety. Amanda played her part flawlessly. She was the adoring wife, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm at the right moments, refilling his wine glass. She was a supporting actress in the grand play of his success. Throughout the meal, her eyes wouldn't meet mine for more than a second. In those fleeting glances, I saw a flicker of something. Guilt? Shame? But it was quickly extinguished, replaced by the same bright, brittle smile she gave everyone. She had made her choice. She had hitched her wagon to his star, and she was content to ignore the fact that I was the one paving the road and paying for the fuel. "And the best part," Jason announced, leaning back in his chair with an air of supreme self-satisfaction, "is that this promotion puts me on the radar of the big guys. I'm talking about the board. I'm talking about investors like Sterling." He mentioned the name of a well-known old-money venture capitalist in the city. "That's why we're throwing a party, a big one, here in 2 weeks. It's not just a celebration. It's a strategic event. We need to show them we belong in their world." I knew what that meant. A strategic event meant expensive catering, a valet service, probably even a live band. It meant another 5-figure bill that would quietly find its way to my desk. "That's wonderful news, son," I said, and my voice was genuine. Despite everything, a part of me, the father part, still felt a flicker of pride. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the success that would finally allow them to stand on their own 2 feet. "Congratulations. I'm proud of you." My simple, quiet sincerity seemed to be the final straw. It was as if my refusal to engage in his world of bravado and competition was an insult in itself. He had laid out his grand conquest, and I had responded, with the gentle approval one might give a child who'd built a decent sandcastle. The air shifted. He refilled his wine glass, a vintage I recognized from a recent credit card bill, and a slow, cruel smirk spread across his face. He wanted to assert his dominance, to put me, the quiet, unsuccessful old man, in my place once and for all. He leaned forward, the picture of a self-made king addressing a peasant, and that's when he asked the question that would bring his entire kingdom crashing down. Jason's words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "Tell me, Rich, what does it feel like to be a loser?" Time seemed to slow down. I saw Amanda flinch, a barely perceptible tightening around her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to speak, to say something, anything, to defend me, but a quick, sharp glance from Jason silenced her. She looked down at her hands, a silent accomplice. The children, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, finally looked up from their screens with wide, confused eyes. I didn't answer him. There was no answer he would have understood. I simply held his gaze, and for the first time in 12 years, I let him see behind the veil of the quiet, accommodating father-in-law. I let him see the engineer, the analyst, the man who understood that every structure has a load-bearing point, and he had just placed an impossible amount of stress on the single pillar holding up his entire world. A slow smile touched my lips. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had just solved a very complex equation. "That's a very interesting question, Jason," I said, my voice even and calm. I folded my napkin, placed it neatly on the table, and stood up. "Amanda, sweetheart, the dinner was lovely, but it's getting late. I should be going." The drive home wasn't filled with fury or sadness. It was filled with a profound, almost peaceful sense of clarity. The fog of my promise to Eleanor had finally lifted. I had been interpreting her words, "Look after our little girl," as a command to shield her from all hardship. But what if I had been wrong? What if truly looking after her meant allowing her to face the consequences of her choices? What if it meant teaching her, and the man she had chosen, the true meaning of value? Back in my office, I didn't pull out the Project Nightingale binder. Not yet. First, I turned on my computer and logged into my master banking portal. My screen lit up with the architecture of their lives, a financial blueprint I had designed and maintained. There they were, line by neat line. Mortgage payment, 12 Elm Street, $4,250. Next payment scheduled, 1st of the month. Lease payment, Lexus RX, $350, $895. Next payment scheduled, 3rd of the month. Lease payment, BMW X5, $150. Next payment scheduled, 5th of the month. Credit card, Amex Platinum, J. Hayes. Balance, $18,740. Auto pay full balance scheduled, 28th of the month. Credit card, Visa Infinite, A. Hayes. Balance, $12,350. Auto pay full balance scheduled, 28th of the month. The list went on. The country club, the utilities, the home insurance. It was a digital life support system, and my finger hovered over the mouse, over the button that controlled the flow of oxygen. For a moment, I hesitated. I thought of Chloe and Ethan. This would affect them. But then I thought of the lesson they were currently learning, that it was acceptable to mock the person who provides for you, that success is something you project, not something you build. That kindness can be mistaken for weakness and exploited. Was that the legacy I wanted for my grandchildren? Or did they deserve to learn the harder, truer lesson that life has costs and integrity is the only currency that truly matters? I took a deep breath. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of correction, an engineering adjustment. I clicked on the first scheduled payment, the mortgage. A small window popped up. Modify or cancel this payment? I moved the cursor to the cancel button. I clicked it. A confirmation screen appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" My smile returned. "Oh yes," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm sure." One by one, I went down the list. The Lexus. Cancel. The BMW. Cancel. The Amex. Cancel auto pay. The Visa. Cancel auto pay. With each click, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. It was the weight of a promise that had become a prison, the weight of 12 years of enabling and silent resentment. I was not destroying their lives. I was simply returning their lives to them. They were their bills, their choices, their responsibilities. I was just handing them back the receipts. The final click was the most satisfying. I logged out, shut down the computer, and the office was plunged back into darkness. But it was a different kind of darkness now. It was the quiet, peaceful darkness before the dawn of a new day, or for them, the quiet before a storm of their own making. The party was in 2 weeks. That gave the system plenty of time for the cascading failures to begin. I have now completed part 3.1. It covers the inciting incident and Richard's first decisive action. The day after the dinner, a profound sense of calm settled over me. It was the calm that comes after a storm, or in my case, the calm that comes before one is deliberately unleashed. My morning routine was unchanged. I made my coffee, read the newspaper, and tended to the small garden in my backyard. To any outside observer, I was just a quiet retiree going about his day. No one could see the financial time bombs I had set the night before, all ticking away on their respective schedules. My phone rang at precisely 9:15 a.m. It was Carol. "I've been staring at my phone for 2 hours," she said, her voice a mix of impatience and concern. "Spill it. What happened after he called you a loser? Don't tell me you just sat there and took it." I stood up, wished them a good night, and went home, I said calmly. "Richard, I swear," she began, her frustration palpable. "And then," I interrupted, savoring the moment, "I canceled every single automatic payment I have been making to their accounts for the past 12 years. The silence on the other end was a thing of beauty. It lasted a full 10 seconds. Finally, a low, slow whistle came through the receiver. "Well, damn," Carol said, and I could hear the grin in her voice. The old engineer finally decided to pull the emergency brake. "What's the damage assessment?" "Total. The mortgage, both car leases, the credit cards, the club dues. I've cut the cord completely," I said. "The first default notices should start hitting their inbox in about a week. The real fireworks will begin a few days after that. Just in time for their strategic event," Carol mused, catching on immediately. "Oh, this is better than any TV show, so what's our next move? Do we prepare a statement? Do we lawyer up?" "We do nothing," I said. "The beauty of this plan, Carol, is in its passivity. I haven't done anything to them. I have simply stopped doing things for them. There is no legal recourse for a gift that is no longer given. I am not an adversary. I am a retired benefactor. Our move is to sit back and watch the show." "And what a show it will be," she chuckled. "That boy Jason has built his entire identity on a foundation of sand financed by you. He has no idea how fast the tide is about to come in. He thinks his value lies in his job title and his fancy car. He's about to find out his real net worth." We spent another hour on the phone, not strategizing, but reminiscing. We talked about Eleanor, about the values we all used to share. It was a necessary grounding, a reminder of why I was doing this. This wasn't just about a petty insult. It was about defending the memory of a woman who valued integrity over image. A woman who would have been horrified to see how her daughter's life had become a hollow performance. For the next few days, there was silence. I didn't hear from Amanda or Jason, which wasn't unusual. They often went a week or more without contacting me unless they needed something. This time, however, the silence was different. It was charged with potential energy. I imagined them going about their lives blissfully unaware. Amanda at her yoga class, Jason in his corner office, both swiping the credit cards that were now just pieces of inert plastic waiting for a server to return with an awkward, "I'm sorry, sir, but this card has been declined. I took Project Nightingale" out of the cabinet. But this time, I wasn't just reviewing it. I was preparing it. I made copies of the most damning pages, the statements showing the Vegas trips, the luxury purchases, the country club fees. I highlighted the dates and amounts. I attached them to copies of the original loan application for their mortgage, the one where they had solemnly sworn their income was sufficient to cover the payments. It was an engineer's report on a catastrophic structural failure, detailing every crack and stress point. This binder was my insurance policy. It was my truth. I had no intention of using it to attack them, but I would be ready to use it to defend myself if they tried to paint me as the villain, as the crazy old man who had cut them off out of spite. I would not let them rewrite this history. The numbers didn't lie. The waiting was the hardest part, but also, in a way, the most rewarding. It required a level of patience and control that I had honed over a lifetime. It was like watching a complex piece of machinery that I had designed finally whir into life. Each silent day that passed was another gear clicking into place, another domino lining up, ready to fall. Jason thought he was a shark in a world of aggression. He was about to learn a very old lesson. The patient crocodile is the deadliest predator in the river. He never sees it coming until the jaws are already closing, and the jaws of his own financial irresponsibility were about to snap shut. The first tremor hit exactly 8 days after the dinner. It was a Tuesday. I know this because I was at the grocery store, deciding between cherry and apple pie, when my phone vibrated. It was a text from Amanda. "Dad, weird question. Did you change your Amex password? My card just got declined trying to pay for the caterer deposit." I looked at the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. The first domino had just fallen. I typed a simple, truthful response. "No, sweetheart. I haven't touched it." I placed my phone back in my pocket and chose the apple pie. The next 2 days were a symphony of silence, but I knew it was the tense, charged silence of growing panic. I could picture the scene in their house perfectly. Amanda would have called the credit card company, only to be told that the account was not in her name and the primary account holder had canceled the automatic payment schedule. The balance, which they had never once had to worry about, was now due in full. A frantic, confused conversation would have followed. "What do you mean, canceled? Dad would never do that. It must be a mistake." Jason, ever arrogant, would have brushed it off. "It's a bank error. I'll sort it out. Use my card." But his card, of course, was on the same payment plan. The real fun would have started when he tried to use it for a large purchase and was met with the same humiliating rejection. The second, more powerful tremor arrived that Friday. I received another text from Amanda. This one was far more frantic. "Dad, Jason just got an email from the mortgage company. It says our payment is overdue, and we're being charged a late fee, and Lexus called him about the car. What is going on? Please call me." This time, I didn't respond. I let the message sit there, a testament to their dawning horror. I had designed this sequence with an engineer's precision. The credit card failure was the warning siren. The mortgage and car payment defaults were the main event. They were now officially in breach of contract on their home and their vehicles. The carefully curated image of their life was beginning to crumble at its very foundations. I spent the weekend in my workshop, restoring an old grandfather clock. The intricate work of cleaning the gears and calibrating the pendulum was meditative. It was a reminder that complex systems require balance. For 12 years, the system of my family had been dangerously out of balance. I was simply allowing gravity and reality to restore the equilibrium. My phone rang incessantly. First Amanda, then Jason. I ignored the calls. Their descent into chaos was a private journey, one they needed to take on their own. Each unanswered call was a lesson in self-reliance they had never been forced to learn. The turning point, the moment I knew there was no going back, the moment that solidified my resolve and erased any lingering trace of doubt, came on Sunday, exactly 1 week after the dinner. I received a notification from the Neighborhood Watch email group. The subject line was, "Suspicious towing activity on Elm Street." My heart didn't race. It settled. I opened the email. A neighbor had taken a photo. There it was, in crisp digital color for the entire neighborhood to see. Jason's gleaming black BMW X5, the ultimate symbol of his self-proclaimed success, being hooked up to a tow truck. The repossession. I imagined the humiliation. the drawn curtains of their neighbors, the whispers. For a man like Jason, whose entire self-worth was tied to public perception, this was a fate worse than death. This wasn't just a financial problem anymore, it was a public shaming. He hadn't just lost his car, he had lost face, and I knew with absolute certainty what would come next. They wouldn't call, they wouldn't text. Their pride was too shattered for that. They would show up at my door, the king and queen of a fallen kingdom, coming to confront the quiet old loser who had, with a few silent clicks of a mouse, revealed their throne to be nothing but a cardboard prop. The turning point was over. The climax was about to begin. They arrived just as dusk was settling on Sunday evening. The doorbell rang, not with its usual cheerful chime, but with a series of frantic, insistent presses. I wasn't startled. I had been expecting them. I took a slow sip of my tea, placed the cup deliberately in its saucer, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw them. Jason's face was a mask of pale fury, his jaw clenched so tight I was surprised his teeth didn't crack. Amanda stood beside him, her face tear-streaked and puffy, her usual polished appearance completely gone. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck washed up on my shore. I opened the door. "What did you do?" Jason snarled, pushing past me into the foyer. He didn't wait for an invitation. Amanda followed meekly behind him, avoiding my eyes. "I'm not sure I know what you mean, Jason," I said, closing the door behind them. My voice was calm, almost placid. This infuriated him further. "Don't play dumb with me, Rich," he yelled, his voice echoing in the quiet house. "The credit cards, the mortgage, the cars. They repossessed my car today. My car. In front of the whole neighborhood. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? Humiliating!" I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. I walked past them into my living room and gestured to the armchairs. "Please sit down. There's no need to shout." "I will not sit down," he raged. "I want an explanation, and I want it now. You are sabotaging us. You are trying to destroy my life, my career." This was the moment, the accusation, the pivot where he would attempt to cast me as the villain. I walked over to my bookshelf, my back to them for a moment. I didn't reach for a book. I just needed a moment to center myself. I turned back to face them, my expression unreadable. "Destroy your life, Jason?" I asked quietly. "Let me be very clear. I have not taken a single thing from you. I have not called your boss. I have not spoken to your clients. I have not withdrawn a single dollar from your bank account." I paused, letting the truth of my words sink in. "All I have done is stop giving you mine." Amanda finally looked up, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. Jason just stared at me, his rage momentarily replaced by confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the last 12 years, I said, my voice still, quiet, but now imbued with the weight of all that time. "I am talking about the promise I made to a dying woman to look after her daughter. A promise that, I admit, I misinterpreted. I thought it meant providing for you. I now see it means teaching you." I walked over to the locked filing cabinet in the corner of the room. I unlocked it, the click of the lock sounding unnaturally, loud in the tense silence. I pulled out the Project Nightingale binder. It was heavy, heavy with the weight of receipts, statements, and 12 years of their choices. I placed it on the coffee table between us. It landed with a solid, definitive thud. "What is that?" Amanda whispered. "That," I said, looking at her, not with anger, but with a profound sense of sorrow, "is your life. Or rather, the life you've been living. The one you thought you had, built." I opened the binder to the first page. It was a summary sheet I had prepared, a single page with a single number at the bottom. 12 years, 144 months. The total amount I have paid for your mortgage, your cars, your credit card debt, your vacations, and your general lifestyle comes to $987,452.16. Amanda let out a small strangled gasp and covered her mouth with her hand. Jason's face went from white to a blotchy, unhealthy red. He was speechless. For the first time since I'd known him, Jason Hayes had absolutely nothing to say. He stared at the number as if it were a venomous snake. I called it Project Nightingale, I continued softly. In honor of your mother, Amanda. She never would have wanted you to struggle, but she also never would have stood for this performance. She valued honesty. She valued hard work. She believed a person's worth was measured by their character, not by the brand of car they drove. I turned the page, revealing copies of their credit card statements. A car, I might add, I said, pointing to a line item, that I paid for. Jason finally found his voice, but it was no longer a roar. It was a strangled, desperate whisper. You kept a ledger? Like a loan shark? This is insane. You're insane. I am an engineer, Jason, I corrected him calmly. I document system inputs and outputs, and this system has been critically unbalanced for a very long time. This isn't a ledger of debt. You don't owe me a dime. This is a record of a gift that has now been discontinued due to, let's call it a reassessment of the recipient's character. I turned the pages slowly, each one a fresh wound for them to witness. The trip to Hawaii, they told me, was a work-mandated retreat. The designer suits Jason had bought to look the part. The spa days Amanda indulged in every other week. It was all there, in black and white. You called me a loser, I said, my voice dropping even lower, drawing them in. Let's examine that assertion. A loser, I presume, is someone who fails, someone who cannot support themselves. By that definition, Jason, who exactly is the loser in this room? The man living quietly and well within his means in a house he owns outright, or the man who is about to be evicted from a house he can't afford, driving a car he doesn't own, with a credit score that is about to fall off a cliff? He flinched as if I had physically struck him. He had no defense. The facts were irrefutable, laid bare on the coffee table in front of him. His entire narrative of the self-made executive, the shark, the winner, had been exposed as a complete fabrication. He was a child who had been playing dress-up in his father's clothes, and I had just taken the clothes away. Amanda was openly weeping now, quiet, shuddering sobs. Dad, I didn't know. I knew you helped, but I had no idea. You had no idea because you chose not to, I said, my voice gentle but firm. It was easier to not know. It was more comfortable to not ask. You let this happen, Amanda. You stood by silently while your husband insulted the man who was paying for the very food on your plate. Finally, Jason's desperation found an anchor. His party. The strategic event that was meant to be his coronation. The party, he croaked. Sterling. My career. Rich. You can't do this to me. Not now. You'll ruin me. I am not doing anything to you, Jason, I said, closing the binder. The finality of the sound echoed in the room. You are doing this to yourself. Your choices have led you here. However, I paused, letting a sliver of hope enter the suffocating atmosphere. They both looked up, clinging to that single word. I am not an unreasonable man, and I do not wish to see my grandchildren out on the street. A flicker of the old arrogance returned to Jason's eyes. He thought he had found a way out. So, you'll fix it? You'll reinstate the payments? I will, I said, on one condition. Anything, he breathed, ready to promise the world. This was my checkmate. My attack wasn't on his finances anymore. It was on the very thing he valued most, his ego, his public image. At your party, I began, your strategic event, you will stand up in front of all of your important guests, your colleagues, and most importantly, in front of Mr. Sterling. And you will make a speech. In that speech, you will publicly thank me. You will tell them all the truth. You will tell them that for 12 years, every success you've had, every comfort you've enjoyed, has been a direct result of the financial backing of your loser father-in-law. You will give me the credit for the house, the car, and the very suit on your back. You will tell them all that you are not the self-made man you pretend to be. The color drained completely from his face. He looked horrified. I had offered him a choice: financial ruin and private shame, or financial salvation and public humiliation. For a man like Jason, it was an impossible choice. "You can't be serious," he whispered. "I have never been more serious in my life," I replied, standing up. "I will restore everything for the next 30 days. Your party will go off without a hitch. The lights will be on. The car will be in the driveway. All you have to do is tell the truth. One speech. One moment of honesty. The choice is yours. Now, I think it's time for you to leave." I looked at the grandfather clock in the hall, the one I had so recently restored. "You have until tomorrow morning to give me your answer." The 2 weeks leading up to the party were a strange, silent truce. Jason called me the next morning, his voice clipped and hollow. "Fine, I'll do it." And true to my word, I made the calls. The financial life support system was switched back on. It was a temporary reprieve, a stay of execution, and we all knew it. There were no more texts from Amanda, no angry calls. Just a heavy, waiting silence. I didn't intend to go to the party. My condition was simply that he make the speech, not that I had to be there to witness his humiliation. But on the afternoon of the event, Carol called me. "You're going," she said. It wasn't a question. "I don't need to be," I argued. "The trap is set. I don't need to watch it spring." "Yes, you do," she insisted. "You need to be there to close this chapter. Not for him, for you. And besides," she added, a sly grin in her voice, "I got myself an invitation. My nephew is one of Jason's junior associates. I'll be your eyes and ears. Wear your good suit. Richard, the charcoal one. Let's give them something to talk about." So I went. As I handed my keys to the valet, a service I was currently paying for, I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was a spectator at the demolition of a building I had designed. The house was ablaze with light, filled with the sounds of laughter, and a live jazz trio. Jason and Amanda stood at the entrance, greeting guests. They were back in costume. Jason in a sharp tuxedo, Amanda in a glittering evening gown. When they saw me, their smiles froze for a fraction of a second. Jason recovered quickly, extending a hand. "Rich, glad you could make it." His handshake was limp, his eyes darting away from mine. Amanda just gave a tight, terrified nod. I found Carol near the bar, looking magnificent in a sapphire blue dress. She handed me a glass of champagne. "Look at them," she murmured, nodding towards our hosts. "Playing king and queen of the castle, pretending the ground isn't about to open up beneath them." The guest of honor, Mr. Sterling, was exactly as I had imagined. An older gentleman with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned his fortune, not just inherited or stumbled into it. I made sure to introduce myself to him early in the evening. "Richard Miller," I said, shaking his hand. "I'm Amanda's father." "A pleasure to meet you, Richard," he said warmly. "Jason speaks highly of his team. You must be very proud." "I believe in letting a man's work speak for itself," I replied cryptically, and he gave me a long, thoughtful look. The moment of truth arrived. Jason tapped a glass for attention, calling for quiet. The room fell silent. He stood in the center of the living room, a spotlight of sorts created by the chandelier above him. He looked pale under the warm lights. His eyes scanned the crowd, looking for escape, but found none. He looked at Mr. Sterling, then at his wife. Finally, His eyes met mine. I gave him a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The choice was his. He cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice strained. "It's an honor to have you in our home to celebrate a new chapter for our company." He spoke for a few minutes, reciting the same empty platitudes about synergy and future growth that I had heard at the dinner table. He was stalling. The crowd began to shift impatiently. He took a deep breath, and I saw him make his decision. He chose his pride. "And I couldn't have done it without the incredible support of my team," he continued. "And of course, my beautiful wife, Amanda." He raised his glass. "To the future." He didn't do it. In the end, he couldn't bring himself to tell the truth. He chose the lie. A quiet sigh of disappointment went through me, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. I had given him a chance to save himself with honesty. He had refused. As the applause started, I placed my untouched champagne glass on a passing tray. I walked calmly to the front of the room, standing just a few feet from Jason. The applause died down as all eyes turned to me. "That was a fine speech, Jason," I said, my voice carrying easily through the silent room. "But you forgot to thank your primary investor." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Jason froze, his face a mask of pure terror. "My name is Richard Miller," I said, addressing the room, my voice steady and clear. "And for the last 12 years, I have been the sole financial backer of what you see here tonight." I didn't need my binder. I knew the numbers by heart. The mortgage on this house, the leases on their 2 luxury cars, the membership at the country club, the tuition for their children's private school, and the credit cards used to pay for this very party have all been paid for by me. The room was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shouting. I was simply stating facts, like an engineer delivering a report. My son-in-law recently asked me what it felt like to be a loser, I continued, my eyes locked on his. "I have come to realize that a loser is not someone who lives a quiet life. A loser is someone who lives a fake one. This investment, as of tonight, is officially terminated. I wish you all a very good evening." I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. Carol caught up with me at the door, a look of fierce pride on her face. As we waited for the valet to bring my car, I could hear the eruption behind us, not of applause, but of shocked, urgent whispers. The play was over. The audience was leaving. The fallout was immediate and absolute. Mr. Sterling, a man who prized integrity above all, pulled his potential investment the next day. Jason's career didn't just stall, it imploded. They lost the house, of course. They lost the cars. They lost their place in the social circle they had tried so desperately to belong to. A few months later, I was on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean, a trip I had put off for over a decade. I received a letter forwarded from my home. It was from Amanda. She had left Jason. She was working again as a paralegal, a job she'd had before she met him. She and the kids were living in a small rented apartment. It was the first honest letter she had written me in years. "Dad," it read, "you didn't ruin our lives. You just stopped letting us ruin yours. You gave us the gift of reality, as painful as it was. I'm finally standing on my own 2 feet. The children are learning what work looks like. Thank you for everything, but mostly for finally stopping." I folded the letter, a genuine smile on my face. I looked out at the endless blue horizon. The promise I made to Eleanor had finally truly been fulfilled. I had looked after our little girl. I had taught her how to stand on her own. And in doing so, I had finally reclaimed my own life. And that's how Richard reclaimed not just his dignity, but gave his daughter the greatest gift of all, reality. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. See you again.